Look at your skin for a second. That color is telling you a story that began long before cities, farming, writing, or even civilization. Because the surprising question isn't really, why are some humans dark and others light? It's this: why did human skin evolve to become lighter at all? And the answer takes us from the African savannah to Ice Age Europe, from ancient diets to vitamin D, and eventually to a discovery that completely changed what scientists thought they knew about European ancestors. But first, we need to go back to the beginning. Africa, where the human story starts. Our species evolved in Africa, where ultraviolet radiation is intense year-round, and that environment created a serious biological problem. UV radiation can damage DNA. It can also contribute to the breakdown of folate, a vitamin essential for normal reproduction and early embryonic development. So humans had a powerful defense already built into their skin: melanin. Melanin absorbs and scatters ultraviolet radiation, helping shield living tissue underneath. That doesn't mean dark skin is simply a better version of skin. It means it was extremely well suited to the environment in which early Homo sapiens evolved. And here's the part that matters. Evolution doesn't design humans for one universal environment. It modifies populations according to the problems they repeatedly face. And eventually, some humans left Africa. That's when the equation began to change. The sun was still there, but its strength wasn't. Imagine taking the same human body and moving it thousands of kilometers north. The sun hasn't changed, but the amount and intensity of UV reaching the skin can be dramatically different. At higher latitudes, sunlight arrives at a lower angle. Seasonal variation becomes stronger. Winters become darker. And now, melanin creates a different problem. Your skin needs some UVB radiation to manufacture vitamin D. Vitamin D helps the body regulate calcium and phosphorus, which are crucial for building and maintaining healthy bones. In severe deficiency, children can develop rickets, while adults can develop weakened, poorly mineralized bones. For ancient populations living without supplements, fortified foods, or modern medicine, this mattered enormously. So humans faced a strange evolutionary trade-off. Too much UV can be dangerous. Too little UV can also be dangerous. And skin pigmentation sits right in the middle of that balancing act. Dark pigmentation provides more protection from intense UV. Lower pigmentation allows more UVB to reach the skin. The evolutionary question wasn't which skin color is best. It was how much pigmentation works best here. But then something weird happened. You might expect Europeans to have gradually become lighter immediately after humans entered Europe. That's not what the evidence suggests. Ancient DNA has revealed something much more complicated. A famous 7,000-year-old hunter-gatherer from Spain, often called La Braña 1, carried genetic variants associated with relatively dark skin, while already having blue eyes. That combination sounds unusual today, but that's exactly the point. The modern European appearance wasn't assembled as one neat package. Different pigmentation traits changed at different times, and some of the strongest genetic changes toward lighter skin appear to have accelerated during the Holocene, thousands of years after humans had already been living in Europe. Ancient DNA studies show major pigmentation variants rising substantially during this period. So what changed? One enormous possibility was sitting right on the dinner table: agriculture. For most of human history, our ancestors hunted, gathered, fished, and ate an astonishing variety of foods. Then, beginning roughly 10,000 years ago in several regions, humans increasingly adopted agriculture. That meant more dependence on staple crops. And suddenly, diet and sunlight were interacting in a new way. A population living at high latitude, eating a relatively low vitamin D diet, and producing less vitamin D through darkly pigmented skin, could face a very different nutritional environment from its hunter-gatherer ancestors. That creates a powerful selective pressure. But here's where we need to be careful. The popular story that agriculture simply caused white skin is too neat. Human pigmentation is influenced by many genes: population movements, diet, UV exposure, and demographic changes. Scientists still debate exactly how much each factor contributed. What the ancient DNA tells us is something more interesting. The transformation was real, but it wasn't one simple switch. Evolution didn't just find one solution. Skin pigmentation is polygenic. There isn't a single black skin gene and a single white skin gene. Many genes influence how much melanin your body produces, how pigment is transported, and how pigmentation is regulated. And different human populations can arrive at similar pigmentation through different genetic changes. That's a classic example of convergent evolution. The environment presents a similar problem. Different populations independently evolve solutions. And that tells us something profound about human evolution. Human variation isn't a ladder, it's a branching tree. There isn't a sequence from primitive to advanced. There are populations adapting to different environments in different ways. Dark pigmentation is not an unfinished version of light pigmentation. Light pigmentation isn't an upgraded version of dark pigmentation. They're different evolutionary solutions to different historical conditions. And then there's blue eyes. Here's another clue that human appearance is much younger than it feels. Blue eyes are strongly associated with a particular regulatory variant near the OCA2/HERC2 region. Research has suggested that a common blue eye-associated mutation arose roughly 6,000 to 10,000 years ago, probably in the region around the Black Sea. But there's an important correction to the popular story. Scientists shouldn't literally say that every blue-eyed person is descended from one identifiable individual with certainty. The evidence supports a common ancestral mutation, not a complete genealogy of every blue-eyed human alive today. And eye colour itself is more complicated than a single gene. Still, the broader point survives. Traits we sometimes imagine as ancient and permanent can actually be surprisingly recent. Human evolution didn't stop when civilization began. It was happening while people were building villages. It was happening while farmers were planting wheat. It was happening while Bronze Age societies were rising. And it's still happening now. The biggest misunderstanding. There's a temptation to look at skin colour and see categories: black, white, Asian. But evolution doesn't see those labels. It sees millions of genetic variants moving through populations over thousands of generations. Skin colour is a visible outcome of that history. It's an adaptation shaped partly by the relationship between UV radiation, pigmentation, nutrition, and geography. And that makes one fact especially powerful. Humanity didn't split into separate biological types. We remained one species, while different populations adapted to different environments. The differences are real, but the boundaries are not the neat boxes people often imagine. Your skin is essentially a record of ancient environmental pressures, a biological compromise written into your DNA. The final twist. And perhaps the strangest part of this entire story is that the sun never cared what any of us looked like. It didn't favour one population. It didn't create better humans. It simply provided different amounts of ultraviolet radiation to different parts of the planet. Our ancestors responded. Some populations evolved toward more pigmentation. Others evolved toward less. And thousands of years later, we inherited the visible consequences. So the next time you look at someone's skin and instinctively think you're seeing a fundamental human difference, remember what you're actually looking at. You're seeing geography written onto biology. Not a hierarchy, not a ranking, a history. And that history began under the African sun. If you enjoyed this kind of deep dive into the hidden science behind ordinary human traits, subscribe, because the human body is full of evolutionary stories that are far stranger than they look.